On this episode of FieldLink, we're going to sit down with two specialists that are going to talk about how we can maximize our return on investment with our fertility program with an organically activated fertilizer program. Mike Powell, Senior Brand Manager for the Helena Products Group, and Steve Howorko from Horizon Ag talk to us about this unique calculator, how growers can learn how to maximize their profit with their fertility program this season. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from the road in Nebraska to talk a little bit about how the USDA report has truly impacted our commodity prices. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. You know, as growers get ready to plant this season, there's a lot of questions around fertility and a lot of questions around how do I plan for profit? On this episode, we're going to sit down with Mike Powell, who's a brand manager for some of our products, as well as Steve Howorko with Horizon Ag Products. And we have a unique product that we're going to be talking about today, really a unique program that's just recently been released, version 2 of the Organically Activated Fertilizer Program called OAFP. Joining me here in the FieldLink studio is Mike Powell, brand manager, senior brand manager. Mike, welcome to FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill.
Mike, tell us a little bit about, let's step back a little bit. Growers are really putting pencil to paper this year as they look at, hey, how can I cut costs? How can I manage my dollars a little more efficiently and effectively with my fertility program and other programs for that matter? Mike, let's talk a little bit about the Organically Activated Fertilizer Program, OAFP, and the app that's been brought forward. And what does it really bring to producers?
Well, the bottom line is it helps farmers make a good decision on how to maximize the fertility that he's applying. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it's all about. We've been, obviously, this program is not new, Bill. We've had this program for over 20 years. We've just kind of made it up to date, brought in dry fertilizer into the program. So we've been talking about this for years.
Sure.
And basically these nutrient use efficiency tools that we have, they're there to help that grower maximize his fertility investment and get the most out of that to, push bushels, pounds, whatever, whatever crop he's growing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of choices out there, a lot of decisions to be made. And joining us on the episode also is Steve out in Denver with Horizon Ag Products. And Steve, you've been a part of this program for a very long time. Tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at Horizon Ag.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate being on the podcast today. My name's Steve Howorko. I'm with Horizon Ag Products, and we are a proprietary manufacturer for Helena Products Group. We provide the products Hydrohuman Resurge, a Receptor, those humic-based products that are really good nutrient use efficiency tools. They're all-around soil health tools. And, what I do as far as in my role within Horizon is I work with our Helena sales reps to do product trainings, working in front of the growers to talk about these products, how they're beneficial in their systems. And one of those sales enablement tools that we've been able to bring, to the field is this OAFP calculator. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to you guys about it today because it's such a powerful tool. And not only can we show where growers can save some money, but we really have tied in 30 years of data to be able to show what the return on investment could possibly be by getting some of these active ingredients into the soils and into those fertility management programs.
Steve, that's really exciting stuff. And, there's a lot of noise and a lot of chatter out there. And growers, quite frankly, I think a lot of them are very confused about this product, that hits the market. We go to trade shows quite often and we'll see, who's the next person on the block. And what you've just described and laid out, what's very unique in this industry is you've got data with many of these products that are inside this calculator that represent 30 years of research and on-farm trials and true information.
I totally agree. Helena was at the forefront of biostimulants, 30, 35 years ago. And Hydrohuman has been, the cornerstone product of these biostimulants. And, with that, there was a lot of study going in before the products were released, to the consumers. But we've been collecting data on these active ingredients for, 35 years now. And it's a long history, and it's a tried and true, it's a proven, source of active ingredients that really help push, they're really soil health tools, honestly. And they just they affect positively every aspect of the physical, chemical, and biological systems in the soil. And we've seen that data. We've seen that prove itself out through the data, and it's powerful stuff to be able to back up the claims that we talk about.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about data before we dive into the calculator. Help ground truth our listeners. Where does this data come from? Where has it come from over the years?
Bill, that's a good question. Of course, I've been involved with Helena now. I'm 35 years in with Helena, and we started with this when I first started with
in the very beginning.
In the very beginning, and it's gone full circle now. Everybody wants to talk about, well, do you want to try a humic? I said, well, look, we've been in this business for 30 years, over 30 years. And as a brand manager, I came in as the brand manager role. Obviously, I've got a lot of people that call on us and want Helena to sell theirs, or there's a lot of questions about it.
You got something better, right? We hear that a lot.
We hear that a lot. And we have tested these products against what our standard is. Our standard's Hydrohume Research. It's the active ingredient that's in those products that we believe, I haven't seen anything more consistent than that as far as in a humic. And it's not just about consistency with the product and increasing yield, but also with these products, handling is very important.
True. Yeah.
In the early days, obviously these products can be very dusty, and we struggled with some of that in working with Horizon. We were able to perfect both Hydrohume DG and Research today as kind of our flagship product that we can add to dry fertilizer. It has something like this has to be able to handle the rigors of fertilizer handling, blending, that whole application part. And that's what we have seen. I've seen as a brand manager is just a tool that's easy to use and gives maximum impact for growers in helping them get the most from their fertilizer dollar.
No, I think that's a really great point. Certainly we have the data to back it up. And we'll talk a little bit more about data in a second, but you hit a really important piece. The products that are recommended through the OAFP program are certainly proven. They're grower friendly. They're handling friendly. They actually, not only do they work, and we'll talk about the data and how that all applies, but boy, in terms of handling these products, that is really, really important for growers, because time is money. And growers cannot afford to slow down when it's go time.
Absolutely. Our data, though, you asked me a question. I don't know that I answered it.
Yeah.
Our data comes from third-party research trials from independent crop researchers.
And those are from across the country and really around the world, too.
Yeah, around the world. Most of the stuff that's in this OAFP program that's used in our database is all U.S. data.
Okay.
And many, many crops across the country with the same active ingredient that we've been using in both Hydrohume liquid, Hydrohume dry, Research, and Receptor's a little different story. We can talk about that later.
I'm going to pull up there real quick. You said many crops, and I think that's an important point for our listeners to hear. This is not just on corn or wheat. We're talking a wide range of crops here, correct?
Yeah. It's coast to coast. California, in the veggie areas, they use it extensively. We use it a lot in most of the row crops from all across the country.
Sure. Awesome. So third-party researchers, there's university.
Side-by-side, university data, side-by-side data from growers, stuff coming in from
our 450 locations around the nation plus. And
so all of that's put together and put into a form. As Steve mentioned, it was tricky getting all that put together.
For sure.
Steve, you may want to talk about that a little bit, but it took, how long did it take y'all to add that into the mix?
Yeah, developing the field trial database, which is on the back end of this calculator, was about a 2-year endeavor. We were looking at 30 years of data from disparate sources, in different formats. We're looking through archives and old emails. At the end of the day, it was over 50,000 data points that we were looking at to get into the database to be able to carve up and synthesize and really show, the power of that information, to be able to dial something in and say, well, what do we have on corn in Indiana on, soil pH of 6.3, with this fertility program, and what kind of trials we have on that, and we can able to kind of push a few buttons and slice and dice that information and kick out, hey, we got 124 trials on corn, and with this particular scenario, here's the effect that the products have had, on that field. And so you can calculate really easily from that a return on investment and the yield increase that you've been able to gather over the years from aggregating or collecting all that data.
That is a tremendous amount of information and data points, as you pointed out, Steve. And again, I like to highlight, let's talk a little bit about the program. You referenced, hey, if I'm in Indiana, I can click here. If I'm talking about corn, I can click here, and it'll give me some insight, correct?
Yeah, it's a completely customizable calculator. We start with a crop. You select your crop you're gonna grow. You select your fertility. You select your soil type. What your fertility management program is, and then you select from there. You can go on and select one of the Helena products. We're talking about hydrogen human research, and Mike mentioned receptor. We have a litany of products in there that we have all this data on, and then it's about throwing those numbers into the calculator and then pushing out a result that shows both a conserved calculation and an enhanced calculation. And the conserved will show you what our data has shown, different efficiencies on nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and we can supplement some of those fertility dollars or fertility pounds or units for the Helena products that we're talking about. And when we do that, we end up getting the same amount of plant available nutrients that we want to have from a grower standard, but we're able to do that with a more efficient look. So we could, for instance, maybe cut back on 50 pounds of urea or 100 pounds of urea, and have that same amount of plant available nutrients and get those available for the plant. The enhanced side would show if we're just going to go 100% grower standard and then add in these products, and that's what we've done historically over the years, is show the benefits of adding these in. And so it might cost you $10 an acre to get something in, but would you be willing to trade that $10 for a $30 or $40 return? And in most cases, growers are very, very, on that side, and they want to be able to push the limits, because, everyone's all our farmers are guys they're competitive. They want to grow the best crop possible. That's why they're in this business. And so we see that enhanced version, or that enhanced calculation, really, really, guys are really interested in pursuing that angle.
Mike, I think it's really interesting that the calculator offers both a conservative approach or an enhanced approach. Can you describe a case where a grower may say, hey, I just want to go with this conservative approach for my farm?
Yeah, I think these questions always come up when fertilizer prices are high and commodity prices are low.
Like right now.
Like right now.
Yep.
I mean, it's here. It was here last year.
For sure.
Farmers are asking, hey, how can I get the most? Where can I cut? They're asking our sales reps, our agronomists, where can I cut? And to me, this tool gives us, I say scientific, data-based information to where if we say we want to cut a little bit of his potash or we want to cut a little bit of his nitrogen, we can do it with some information to back that up. Now, farmers cannot farm without fertilizer.
Correct.
They've got to have the right, if they're shooting for yield, they've got to have the right NPK, all of the things that their soil test recommends to meet their yield goal. They got to do some of that, but we can guide him better based on our data that's in this program. If he wants to cut, we can just play around with it. So if we say you cut some P, so you cut some K, or let's say you just want to focus on N. We've got it. You can do it all there.
Mm-hmm. And what that does is the results keeps things in balance, doesn't it, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's really what this calculator is, giving you a perspective, data-based perspective. So we're really leaning into more science versus feelings in a lot of cases.
Right.
Yeah, good deal. Okay, Steve, talk to us a little bit about the enhanced side. You had a unique story that you shared with me before we got online where, obviously this time of year, this time of season, the environment we're in, Mike referenced, hey, a lot of folks are probably going to lean on this conservative. But that's not true for every grower, is it?
No, it's fact that, I was at a trade show in Georgia last week, and I was talking to a rice grower from Arkansas, and we were talking about, the hydrohuman and research products, and I got on to ask him if he wanted to, share with me some of his fertility program, and I'm going to show him this calculator. So I pull out my phone because we got this calculator both on a mobile version and it's a web based. So we can do it on my iPhone. I can do it on a tablet, or I can do it on a computer. Pulled out my iPhone at the trade show, and I went through his fertility program with him. We're going through his soil type. We're going through his state in Arkansas, his crop, rice that we're growing. And we get to the end of the calculation, and I said, well, look, Mr. Farmer, it looks like I can save you about $3 an acre by supplementing in research, 10 pounds of research into your fertility program. We'll be able to cut some of your SOP there. We'll save you about $2 to $3 an acre on that. And then I said, but if you look over here at the enhanced side of the calculation, if we run your straight grower standard program with your sulfate of potash and then add in that 10 pounds of research, what we're showing from these 250 trials that popped up from the database is an average of $50 an acre return on investment. And he looked at me and he said, well, I think I know which one I'm going for. And it was an interesting conversation. It's always nerve-wracking a little bit when you do these live because sometimes they don't pencil out.
Right.
You're looking based on the price of the fertility and what the commodity price is. You're getting into situations where you don't really know how it's going to play out. Sometimes you can save a little bit of money, $4 or $5 or $6, $10 an acre. I've seen in some cases. And sometimes you're looking at it as, well, I can get you a discount, maybe $3 or $4 just to add in per acre to add in these products that are going to pay long-term dividends. But when he saw that $50 an acre return, that what we've shown for 250 trials using this product on those type of soils with that crop, he was quite excited about that and moving forward with purchase.
Yeah, and I think that's a great story and a realistic story for, sometimes, when things are tight like this, we all want to go to the conservative side of things. But boy, having the ability to jump over to that enhanced side, and it's not just about selling more product. It's about setting that grower up for the most success that he or she could have on his or her farm, isn't it? Mike?
I would say absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely for sure. So, okay, guys, let's talk about why organically activated products. Mike, what is the difference? What's this push around organics versus, synthetics, for example?
Well, we're using organic compounds to add to a synthetic fertilizer to help take care of problems that exist in the soil. So like, for example, a man applies nitrogen. Nitrogen is about 30 to 70% efficient in the soil. Without some sort of protection. People use protection all the time for nitrogen. It's either going to volatilize or leach. And we have proven over time that these products like Research Hydrogen Receptor can help the crop, help the fertilizer stay in the zone and make it available to the plant as it's growing versus moving out of or getting tied up, right? Yeah. Same thing with phosphate. Phosphate is applied all the time, but there's a lot of things going on in the soil that can help, that will tie it up. Sure. And what we're doing with a lot of with our organically activated products is keeping that nutrient available to the plant during the growing season so that the plant can uptake it when it needs it rather than just locking it up and it's not good for anything. So that, to me, when I say locked up nutrients, he's bought $100 worth of fertilizer, but he's only getting $50 worth.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is make sure he's getting all of his money's worth.
Right. Trying to extract the value for your investment, essentially. Yeah. And I think it's important, Steve, to highlight that this approach is a very sustainable approach, isn't it?
Yeah, Bill, it definitely, like I've talked about here, hydrohuman research, the receptor, they are soil health tools. They're soil health driven products. They're 100 million years in the making. These active ingredients are very potent. They've proven nutrient use efficiencies. And so on nitrogen, we're looking anywhere from about 15% is the average over the past 30 years that we've seen. Phosphate and potassium, 20% efficiencies over those years. The properties of humics themselves are able to, they interact with these fertilizers and really mitigate the loss mechanisms. When you're talking about nitrogen, you're subject to volatilization, to leaching, to denitrification. You get phosphate tie-up. Hydrohuman research can interact with those synthetic fertilizers and hold them in a plant available form, for the plant to access throughout the growing season. It's proven science. It's, we've seen it ourselves, like I've said, for 30 years. We've seen the effects and the positive, outcomes from growers be able to get, these products into their system.
Yeah, definitely a proven area here. And Mike, we've talked about this in other podcasts too. It really comes down to the source. And the source with hydrohuman research receptor, that's the real key here, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's got to start out with the source. If you don't have the right source, you're not going to get results. There's many products, humic products in the marketplace,
Right.
But if they don't mine it properly and they don't get the right and the balance between the humic and the fulvic, I know I'm getting technical on you here.
Sure.
But it's about getting the right blend of that to deliver the same product all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that I think that we've been able to get through Horizon Ag is that consistency. We've been selling the same product for 30 years.
Right.
We're using the same active for 30 years. And a lot of these other products that are in the marketplace can be substituted, or they just go dig some ore. They might just go dig some humic ore and put it in a bag and say, hey, this is my humic.
Yeah.
And it might work sometimes, it may not. That's what we've been able to build with these products is consistent results, and we know what they'll do.
Yeah, that is really the important piece in terms of source and having that word consistency, as you pointed out. And Steve, we've got over 30 years of consistency, don't we, in this day?
30 years of the products, and like I mentioned earlier, hydrohuman is the cornerstone product. And what I do when I go out and talk to growers, or I'm talking to Helena guys on the training side, is I have to be able to guarantee that a bag of hydrohuman DG or a gallon of hydrohuman liquid will perform the same tomorrow as it did 30 years ago. Obviously, over that time, we've made enhancements to lower the dust content or mitigate some of the fallout to clean up the liquids and make them more blendable. But the performance of the product in the field, once it's in the ground, it has to be the same. It has to have that consistency, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. It's a product then that wouldn't work. And for these products, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do to make a consistent product out of a variable source, and something as variable that is 100 million years in the making.
And you guys certainly have a strong history of being consistent, for sure.
Yeah, we've been in business for 40 years. Helena's our exclusive partner. We work tirelessly to understand and extract the most potent and active forms of these active ingredients, and we take painstaking efforts to manufacture the products and preserve their molecular integrity, their functional group integrity, so that when they get to the field, they have that efficacious nature of them, and they will provide a return on investment to the grower.
Mike, how can growers access their organically activated fertilizer program calculator?
The best way to access this would be to find their local Helena representative and inquire about it. Mm-hmm. And they can help them with that.
Sure. They can access it through their Helena representative. This is not a publicly distributed program for everybody to access because, Steve, it takes a little bit of experience and background to really explain, some of the things that are going into the calculator.
Yeah, we want to make responsible calculations. We want to do this the right way. You never want a crop to run short on fertility ever. That's the last thing in the world you want to do. And so we're looking at this always through the lens of protecting the grower, protecting that crop. And so we want to make sure that, when we're walking through these scenarios or these possibilities, that we have all the information possible, that we're being as safeguarding to the crop and to that grower's financial, bottom line as possible. And you do that through people like, our Helena salesmen that are experts in the field, and they are, the best advisors that are around. They can walk the grower through the their fertility programs and really find those efficiencies. But to have that other person, that consult to be able to work through this with is pretty imperative in a situation like this, where you're looking at tweaking fertility programs.
I think that's a really good point, Steve. And, I think it's really important for our listeners to know that the OAFP calculator is really a tool. It's a tool, and it's set up to provide confidence to the grower to making his or her decisions in their fertility management process this year, and frankly, every year, right, Mike?
Yes. Like I said, we've had this tool a long time. We just made it better.
Yeah.
And brought in a lot more of the information. But that's what it's always been about, is helping a grower to make the right decision on how to maximize his fertility.
Yeah. And to recap a little bit, it's really important to know for growers to understand this calculator can fit pretty much every farming operation that uses fertility. Whether you're using a liquid product or a dry product, it's available. No matter if you're growing grapes in California, or Steve, you referenced rice in Arkansas, or corn in Indiana, the OAFP tool is a fit for pretty much every farmer.
Yes.
Well, guys, I want to thank you both for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink as we learn about this unique calculator and some of the products that are inside of the calculator that you can certainly enhance growers' performance on their farm and their fertility program for 2026 and beyond. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us, Bill.
Appreciate it, Bill. Thank you so much.
And welcome back to FieldLink, and joining us from Nashville, actually from Omaha today, Jody Lawrence from the FieldLink Market Report. Jody, how are things in Omaha, Nebraska today?
A little chilly, but going to get a lot colder over the weekend, and just doing the winter meeting rotation. Looking forward tonight to going to Lincoln and watching the number 8 University of Nebraska men's basketball team play their known heated logistical rival in Washington. So it's looking forward to it, because we always have a great time at this meeting every year and get to go see the Huskers in that great facility that they have down in Haymarket.
The Pinnacle Arena, certainly a big change. As a Nebraska alum, it was really hard for me to watch Indiana win the national championship in football the other night, but hey, good on them. I think the pages have switched. Indiana, now a football, I guess, dynasty, if you want to call it that. It's on its way. And Nebraska back into basketball. That's just crazy, isn't it, Jody?
Yeah, you're moving back into, like Seinfeld, the bizarro world of things you never thought you'd see happen in our lifetime. But yeah, NIL has changed every part of the game. And that's why, for all the Husker fans and all the Midwest farming states, universities, Iowa State, everybody, we need to get the price of corn back up $7 to get those NIL donations up for your football and basketball teams.
We definitely need it in Lincoln, that's for sure, as well as other places across the country. Jody, we got, speaking of roller coasters and the NIL, we've got roller coaster going on in the commodity markets right now. And there's lots of questions around commodities, where they're going to land, and folks are scratching their heads right now going, well, where's these input prices at? Jody, talk to us.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time of the year. Everybody's sensitive to what's going on in early mid-January because of prepay, where prices. Let's start looking at putting together some margin sheets and some P&Ls and what am I going to do? But really the first thing I think we have to address what I'm hearing on the road is, and the question is, how come the inputs aren't going down with the price of corn? And that historically has been what happened whenever corn would, go down, 10, 15%. Let's say it went from $4 to $3.50, $3.60. Within about 4 to 6 weeks, all of the input prices, seed, chemical, fertilizer, even rent and land costs would go down the same percentage, but even as late as about 15 years ago. But with the expansion of world agriculture, what's happened, although we're using just as much as we did 20 years ago, we are now a smaller portion of the world ag market on what we're purchasing. We went from having massive leverage, really controlling about 30, a third, just call it a third of the market 20 years ago, to now we're controlling about 10% of it. And you look at the growth in Brazil, you look at the growth in Southeast Asia, China, Black Sea area, Australia, all the acreage that keeps expanding around the world, while the U.S. has been, long since landlocked on what we can plant. So, and that has made all the input prices far less elastic to the price of corn, because you have got world expansion, and we're now one of 10 buying those inputs as opposed to one of 3 where we had pricing power before. So this is not an issue that your local retailer is trying to take advantage of you. This is at the very top of the food chain that the CFs of the world, the Mosaics and the Pioneers, and you just go through the whole list of it, not to pick on them, but everybody knows the names, that they have the ability to have some pricing power, because what we saw last year, and this will dovetail into the USDA report, is to get the type of yields that the farmers need to make all these margins work, you have to have the top level of inputs, and you really have to pour that nitrogen to your corn crop to get these extra 5, 10, 15 bushel bumps. So don't get mad with your salespeople when you see the prepay sheet or the prices that they're quoting, because this is really an issue of the expansion around the world, and it has very little to do with the U.S. And then one of the other problems that we're running into is we get almost 80% of our potash from Canada, from CF, and the more trade tensions we develop with them, telling them we're just going to come take them over, or we need them to be the 51st state, does not help, because those tariffs are being added to that potash, to whatever we're importing agriculturally from Canada. While there have been some exceptions, it has not been on potash. So that also is an issue. Everybody needs to understand the whys of that the input prices are staying relatively flat over the past few years, while the price of corn keeps dropping back.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of implications, from geopolitical side of things, but demand is the biggest point. And to your point, supply. This is really a supply demand challenge, isn't it, Jody?
Yeah, and talking about the USDA report, you look at it, and this should be a time, just like in 25 and in 24, where we're making these winter tours, having these winter meetings, talking to all the farmers, and we should be celebrating the success of agriculture, not only just in the United States with the big yields that we're getting, but around the world. And you look at what the USDA kind of shocked us with last Monday, that the yield at 186.5 just blew everybody out of the water. It's a spectacular yield, and there's really nothing, there's no point in trying to argue with the USDA, because the market is going to trade this number. But that number is so impressive of what we've been able to accomplish from the new products, the genetics, the technology, and all the machinery, and the hard work of everybody with boots on the ground in that acre, better stewardship of the ground, the willingness to try new products, to try new ways of farming. And this is showing up, because you'd hardly call last year's growing season a Goldilocks, Garden of Eden situation over the entire Midwest. There were certainly big areas, big production areas that had great weather all year, but just the inconsistency, what we are seeing, and this has been the trend really over the past 6 to 8 years, and COVID allowed us to take our eyes off that ball, is that we are getting better yields out of what you would consider to be less than ideal weather. And if that continues to happen, we need to celebrate it, because we're doing exactly in our industry what we're supposed to do, which is produce more in what could be some challenging conditions for some. to feed the world. But then the other side of it is it becomes very cannibalistic that we are increasing production at a time when we need to find more demand to get these prices back where everybody wants. So it's the hard edge of this double-edged sword that production agriculture always faces.
Jody, we talked about this, I think, in our last podcast too, and I really continue to echo this. It just really points out the fact that we've done a phenomenal job as an industry, maximizing yields to our latest abilities. I mean, my goodness, as you mentioned, the USDA, they shocked everybody with some of those yield estimates. They shocked the industry. How did industry, traders like yourselves and others, how did we miss that?
That's always the great question, because you look at what the range of estimates was. The range was as low as 182, and they're always the outliers, the people who take it down, and then somebody that has it on the high end. Somebody did have it at 186, and I don't think this is a good spot to start naming names of people who were better or worse at it, but just the field reports that we were getting, and this includes all of the information that you and I hear when we're on the road from all of the Helena agronomists, from all of the Helena sales team, and the farmers that are out there. Hey, this happened, that happened. I'm really happy, or I've got some concern. But what you have to look at is that is a full 7.2 bushels per acre above last year. And last year's crop we thought was really good and producing at the very highest end of its potential due to the weather. So, I mean, it's an enormous bump to get, gosh, what's that? Almost 5% yield bump when you go from a big crop to just a giant crop. And the real killer in this, the yield always gets a lot of focus. But what the USDA found, and where these extra basically 400 million bushels came from, was the U.S. planted 5 million additional acres over 24 last year. 5 million acres, you have a 180 yield. All of a sudden that's 900 million extra bushels. We did use some of it, wow. But the hook in this, where the bushels really came from, because if you add 1 bushel on harvest of 90 million acres, 90 million bushels the industry and the markets can deal with. But when you add 1 million extra acres of harvest, because the silage numbers were down and it went into the bin, all of a sudden you go from 90 to 180. And 180 becomes a number that they have to address. And the silage acres were off probably about 1.5 million plus the extra yield. You've got 400 million extra bushels, and the market, hit the number. We always talk about this. What's the best rule of thumb is for every 250 million bushels you add or subtract from ending stocks, the market is going to move 20 to 30 cents to address that. And it hit it almost on the number. Now, we've bounced a little bit from that, but that's still, it's you would call it an embarrassment of riches on how good the crop was, but at a time we just did not need the extra bushels.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly a message that we need to create demand, and we need to create demand internally, whether that's, certainly biofuels is potentially an option. And we've talked a lot about this on the FieldLink podcast, but boy, we got to dig deeper. We've got to look for different uses for both corn, soybeans, and other commodities out there. Long term, we got to do that pretty quickly, don't we, Jody?
Yeah, and one of the disappointing things that we read about this morning is that the government is heading towards another shutdown at the end of January, and the stopgap funding bill did not include year-round E15. They were hoping to attach it kind of as a back end, how people slide these things in. And, some of them you like, some of them you don't. But this was unfortunately taken out, because what they don't feel good that as a standalone bill in front of the House and Senate in an election year that it would be able to pass. So it's disappointing that we're not going to take steps towards E15 year round. And the other thing really is, you've got, when we talk about bean demand because you look at a couple different factors. Brazil's crop this year, they will be able to export all of China's bean needs. And it's the first time ever in the history since China has been building up Brazil's production that Brazil can match them 1-for-1 on what their beans are. So now we've got a domestic bean use problem in the U.S., and that's got to be through increased biofuel usage, the sustainable aviation fuel that we've talked about several times over the last 6 months. These are the programs that we have to address because those are the ones that where we can use all this and we won't have to be so dependent on, oh gosh, did China buy their 12 million metric tons? Are they going to buy 24 million metric tons in 26 and 27? These are the types of things we could take care of. If we took care of our own house for this and we didn't let Elon Musk and his clear agenda that he wants electrification of all the vehicle fleet to not allow him as big a voice as he gets. We need to, as an industry, whether all the associations, corn growers, the bean growers, all the associations that your checkoff dollars or your dues go to, these are the types of things we have to get addressed immediately, because if we end up having, and Mother Nature cooperates in 26 and we have another record crop, this is something that normal demand it would take years and years to eat through it. And also it would have to be addressed. And the way the government's going to address it in a midterm election year is they were already talking about another farmer assistance payment package that coincidentally will come in right before the election.
Oh boy. Yeah. Perfect timing, right, Jody?
Yes.
Well, Jody, want to thank you for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Folks, you can catch up with Jody. He's going to be at the Commodity Classic in San Antonio on stage on February 25th through the 27th in San Antonio. Again, the Commodity Classic coming up. Jody, kind of looking forward to that warm weather down there. How about you?
Yeah, since we're going to get snowmageddon all through the Mid-South and Memphis and then Nashville this weekend, I'll get a full 10 years worth of snow at my house probably. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this interview in one of those boats on the Riverwalk with a margarita in our hand and just see where the conversation goes.
Well, we'll definitely be ready for a Corona-Rita down in San Antonio at the Commodity Classic coming up again at the end of February. Be sure to make your plans to join us at the Helena booth inside the Commodity Classic. Jody, thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill.
Folks, learn how innovation never stops at Helena by stopping at the Commodity Classic and see us at our booth, and learn how innovation never stops at Helena, February 25th through the 27th.